Dred Scott decision, blacks were only 3/5 of persons. And in the Dred Scott decision, 1857, in the eyes of the law, so far as civil rights and relations are concerned, the slave is not a person, it's a thing. Now, parents with your young children, when you see this caution sign up here, it means there's going to be a graphic picture that follows. What is it? And they can look away or under your instruction. I'll tell you when it's down. But what do we typically do when something's a thing and not a person? We can treat it any way we want to. Whole families were lynched all over America because the African American was not a person under our law, but a thing. What about in Canada? From 1876, women are persons in matters of pains and penalties, but are not persons in matters of rights and privileges. How do you like that, ladies? You're okay for pains and penalties, but when you're a person in that regard, but not when it comes to rights and privileges. Well, that didn't sit well with Emily Murphy, who in 1960 became the first woman elected to Parliament in the entire British Empire. And so when she went to be seated in the Canadian Parliament, the Prime Minister said to her, "Emily, I can't seat you." And she said, "Why not?" He said, "You're not a person under Canadian law." She said, "We'll see about that." So she went to the Canadian Supreme Court and she asked them one question: am I a person under the Canadian Charter? Okay, we all want to challenge Roe. All of you have heard that personhood will not succeed in a legal challenge to Roe. If you haven't heard that, you haven't dug deep enough into the personhood movement. What do you think the Supreme Court said? Did they overturn the ruling? Specifically, that women were persons. She appealed. The court's answer was absolutely not. You are not a person. You cannot be seated. End of subject. They did not overturn the bad ruling. But what happened? What happened next? 1922. Anybody know?
A public outcry?
Public outcry that led to the suffrage movement both in Canada, the United States, England, all over the world. And what happened as a result? Women got the right to vote, but more importantly, they were granted government recognition as persons under the law. You see that it all comes down to persons, personhood. What happens when women aren't protected? Economist magazine called me last Friday for an interview of what was going on up in North Dakota. Because even though they are a pro-abort newspaper, according to their own description, international in scope, pro-woman, feminist, they said that this action of identifying women for abortion based on gender is something that a culture cannot in any way accept. You can't accept that premise. And so they did an entire cover story on it back in March of 2010, and North Dakota passed their gender-side bill, or is voting on their gender-side bill on Tuesday. And Economist magazine wants to revisit what's going on in North Dakota under the personhood type approach. African American Indians, as late as 1881, an Indian is not a person within the meaning of the Constitution. Congress may prevent an Indian from leaving his reservation, and while he is on a reservation, it may deprive him of his liberty, his property, his life. Native Americans are not persons under the Constitution. As late as 1881. Can anybody remember what happened? Yes?
I think I might have read something about that somewhere, that they weren't persons because they were like so primitive, and so they didn't think they were, as intelligent as, I don't know.
You remember the Little Bighorn? Mm-hmm. What happened at the Little Bighorn?
I forgot what happened, but I read it, but I don't know.
Custer's Last Stand, okay? Custer slaughtered the Native Americans because they were rebelling against U.S. encroachment into their grants. Well, okay, it's over. It's done. Custer was killed. The Indians fled to Canada. What happens now? There were a lot of Native Americans still left in America that didn't participate in that slaughter, that were peaceful, had already struck agreements with the U.S. government, and in fact one of them, under Chief, I think it was Spotted Elk, asked the U.S. cavalry to come and surround their village with cavalry to protect them from the angry settlers and rogue cavalry that were in the area wanting revenge. And please escort us peacefully 60 miles away to another Indian tribe that also is known as a peaceful Indian tribe, and we will be protected under your care. And over the course of the next few weeks, they traveled the 60 miles, men, women, and children. And be careful, the 1890 massacre at Wounded Knee, that helpless children and women with babes in their arms had been chased as far as 2 miles from the original scene of the encounter and cut down without mercy by the troops. It's what happens when you are not covered or recognized as persons under the law. And of course we know that Nazis were in the same boat after Nuremberg laws. Now you know why they held the trial at Nuremberg? Because it was the city of Nuremberg that passed the edict that removed Jews from being persons under the German. They were even declared not even human beings. What happens when something is no longer a member of the human race? And why is it always the women and the children? Okay, the whole case boils down to this disturbing pattern of disputing someone's humanity to weaken his claims to rights of personhood, which repeats itself again and again in Western history. And we've got one more bad scene. We are now expanding our battlegrounds through emerging technology. What is it? Dehumanization through the denial of personhood. The culture erodes, the whole thing collapses, and judgment occurs because that's the final step or stage of violating God's intrinsic, inalienable right to life that He's granted us because we've been created in His image. It goes beyond the abortion issue. It is something that the young people are engaging in. I can tell you that who are the natural and new allies of personhood and the personhood movement? Have you heard of the Family Research Council in Washington, D.C.?
The ones that were shot up by the
crazy guy that came in and began shooting people.
Yeah.
You can always tell who's doing the right job by the opposition Satan throws at them. Father Frank Pavone, Priest for Life, was the very first ally we had in Georgia. When we offered the Personhood Amendment to the Georgia Constitution in 2007, he immediately wanted to be part of it and has been ever since. Father Frank Pavone, Thomas More Law Center, the good folks up there that defend Christian liberties and right to life causes were invaluable allies initially. American Family Association throughout, they're on board big time. They were one of the early allies. We have in North Dakota, we are seeing all the pro-life groups come together, including, for the first time ever, the North Dakota Conference of Catholic Bishops, because the USCCB initially came out in opposition to personhood because the timing was not right to challenge Roe, in their opinion. And so bishops all across the country followed the USCCB leading and opposed personhood efforts state by state. That has changed. One of the most vocal opponents to personhood was Christopher Dodson in North Dakota as the representative of the bishop. Well, something remarkable happened. The old bishop was reassigned and a new bishop came in who embraced personhood for the first time here in the United States. Now, bishops all over Mexico, Central, South America have been in favor of personhood for years now. Mexico has passed a personhood amendment in 18 of their 22